Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we are starting my Booker Prize journey. So I don't do the Booker Prize journey every year. I don't always read the Booker long list or short list or anything like that, but I have done the full long list once before, and I think I've done the shortlist as well another year, or maybe like just a few or something like that. And then this year I wasn't really gonna do it, but then I got tempted when it got close to the date in which the long list was announced. Now, I had intended to actually do more, or like to already be further along in the Booker journey than I am right now, because it's the 1st of September and I've read 0 of the long list. Now the short list is getting announced on September 21st, so I do still have time and hopefully I can do some more reading. If you want to see my reaction to the long list, I do have a video for that. Mind you, it's just going to be me discovering the long list, reading the synopsis, and deciding which books I want to tackle myself. So there were 6 books in there that I decided to tackle, 5 of which I do physically own at this point, so those will be my priorities to get through, and then that 6th one will be the next one if I manage to get it through all of these 5 in a timely manner, because there are still some other September reads that I also want to do, so I might not get to that 6th one, and then once the shortlist is announced I will reassess whether I want to pick up something else. But so we are starting with In Ascension by Martin McInnes. This is a book that I had seen around already before that, and actually debated getting it when I was in Waterstones, like right before the announcement of the long list. This is classified as sci-fi apparently, though it is like I saw it like described as like highbrow sci-fi. All I really remember about this is that it has to do with deep ocean research, and that apparently it treats the deep ocean kind of like space. And to be fair, if you've seen the deep ocean episodes of Planet Earth, then that makes absolute sense, because there's some really creepy stuff down there. So I'm very eager to see what that means. I did start this book yesterday evening. So yesterday evening I sampled the first chapter of this, and I gotta say that I'm very eager to continue on now, because this has a very easy but also beautiful writing style that I'm really getting along with very well, which isn't always the case for these Booker type of books, because a lot of times the language might be a little bit more highbrow or a little bit more sort of like flowery, elaborate than my personal taste. But so far for this one, I gotta say that the writing is really working for me. So I will be sampling more of this book, and then I'll be getting back to you to let you guys know how I'm getting along with it. Hello everybody! It's been over a week since my previous clip in this vlog, but so I have finally finished In Ascension by Martin McInnes, and I gotta say, after like the first day of reading this book, there was no point of my brain that it would ever imagine that it was going to take me more than a week to finish this, but here we are. It took me more than a week to finish it. So I assume I talked about the premise, but I'll just repeat it in case I didn't. So we are looking at this girl from Rotterdam who has a bit of a difficult childhood, or it's alluded that she had a difficult childhood, but like her father she goes into marine biology and she specializes in algae. And then upon one of her early jobs she is kind of exposed to this weird phenomenon that will kind of impact her life and her professional direction from that point onward. And so especially the book is divided into like 4 or 5 sections, and especially the first section was actually the section that most intrigued me, and that is the section that mainly dives into, pun not intended but very well established, dives into deep water life and deep water research, and that is what I thought the entirety of the book was kind of going to be about. But basically we are going to be using the deep water research and the conclusions coming from that to use those methods towards another means. That's all I can really go into without really spoiling anything, but because of that it means that the book takes a little bit of a different direction afterwards, and I was really intrigued and kind of like unsettled in the first section of the book because of that setting, and then when we go to a different setting, which has in itself also its own type of unsettling prospects that it definitely also realizes, that's just less of a setting for me apparently than that deep water setting was. So I was kind of left being less than intrigued when we got to the middle section. The middle section definitely lulled for me. There I definitely had to kind of struggle to continue being like, we are going to get somewhere, we are going to get some more answers related to the sort of unsettling things that are taking place in the first section, and that definitely is the case, but I still feel like I was most engaged and enthralled within that first section, and then it just kind of like lingered on for me, where my sort of like push through the novel disappeared, unfortunately. So I think it was a very pleasant experience writing wise. I really enjoyed the writing. It was very fluent to get through. It was a very easy writing to digest, and even though it's a very easy writing, it's also a writing that does manage to draw depth and to go into certain topics quite heavily. I think the main topic in here for me is that's really being discussed is like sister dynamics or family dynamics. We're very much looking at this sisterly bond between these two sisters, even though we don't actually see them interact all that much. Most of their interaction takes place over the phone, if at all, because they are actually living on different continents. But this sisterly bond and the bond with their mother and the needs of her mother, who seems to be who seems to be suffering from dementia, or dementia is starting to set in. Those are the themes that kind of most heavily resounded with me throughout this read. But so unfortunately a little bit of a letdown, because in that first section I was really kind of expecting this to become a 5-star read by the end of it, and at the end it's just like a 3-star. It's a 3-star because of how much I enjoyed at the beginning and because of how much I think the writing really worked for me. But as I said, even though it's easy, digestible writing and I enjoyed it, there were parts in which it was difficult for me to get through just because I was losing interest in the story, unfortunately. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be picking up the audiobook for This Other Eden by Paul Harding. This audiobook is on Script, so I do have access for it. I have finished my audiobook that I had currently going on. As I bicycle to work, I like to listen to audiobook, and so this is the next one that I'm going to be picking up this way. And so, as I did with the first one, I'm going to be checking in with you guys after chapter 1. It'll depend on how short chapter 1 might potentially be, and then kind of we'll take it from there. Alrighty guys, change of plans. I listened to The House of Doors instead. Oops, just knocked you guys against the mic. But so yeah, I listened to The House of Doors instead because Script is being very annoying for me. So I listened to the end of In Ascension today because I was just really struggling with physically continuing it and my reading pace with it. So I listened to it on audio instead, but I was kind of hesitant to do it because I knew that there was a risk that Script would restrict my reading, and it did. So This Other Eden has disappeared from my options on Script, so I'll have to physically read it, which means that I didn't want to start tonight because the whole goal was to start an audiobook because then I can continue it on my commute. So I am going to be starting The House of Doors instead by Tan Fang Ung. Now I've only listened to the prologue at this point in time, so I don't have like a ton to tell you guys about it yet, because this basically just sees us meeting up with the female protagonist of this story. I think it's told from multiple perspectives, I assume. And so she has lost her husband and is living in South Africa at this point in time, and there she receives a parcel, which is the newest novel of W. Somerset Maugham, and this, I assume, is going to be our way into her memories of her time in Penang. It kind of talks about a period of, I think, 2 weeks in which this author was in Penang, and they were friends at that point in time. So I'm thinking that that is a period in time in which the majority of this book is going to take place. I do hope that most of this is going to take place in Penang, because it has been difficult for me to listen to the audiobook right now. I have been reading along with it, luckily, because now it uses a lot of Afrikaans, which is a language that is very close to Dutch, and the way that it's pronounced, it just makes it unclear for me, maybe just because of the combination with reading it as well, because I see like vowels from my native language, Dutch, and then I hear something pronounced in a way that I don't understand, so that has been confusing. But I'm assuming that like this is going to mainly take place in Penang, so we won't have that issue anymore, and maybe this is also just an issue of like my brain reading in Dutch, whereas it should be Afrikaans, which is pronounced slightly different. But so I'm going to try to make use of my camera still, but it is kind of overheating now, so, because I just filmed a very long video. So let's see if I can still try and give you an update about my reading for the Booker Prize. So I finished The House of Doors yesterday, and I really loved it. I don't think it's a 5-star, but it's just like, it's a type of 5-star that's not a 5-star just because I'm like, I don't love it, you know. I thought it was really, really good. I was surprised by how much I loved it, because I was kind of fearing my experience with this book before starting. And so it just like, it exceeded expectations, and so that kind of makes me go like, oh, it's even better than a 4, but I think it's just like a 4. It's a book that did really, really well, that I will remember having really loved, but that's maybe in a few months' time I will have forgotten a lot of the details about, for example. But so what I really enjoyed about this is very much a multi-layered story. So we have multiple timelines, we have 2 perspectives that we're following. So we started out in that first chapter that I read in Doornfontein in South Africa, with Leslie. At a later point in time in her life, her husband has passed away and she is now stuck there by herself, and she receives a book from the author W. Somerset Maugham, and then that takes her back down memory lane to think back on the time in her life in which Willie Somerset Maugham was visiting her and her husband Robert in Penang, and then while most of the story takes place in that storyline. Within that storyline and within that timeline, we also have Leslie retelling a past storyline to Willie, talking about a case involving one of her best friends that took place in Kuala Lumpur. So there are multiple layers to these stories, and what I loved is that there are so many, like not just layers, but so many narrative tidbits that keep you intrigued. From the get-go you have that sort of like juxtaposition between that first chapter taking place in Doornfontein and then the second chapter where her husband is mentioning from the past perspective that he wants to move there for his health, and she is adamant about not wanting to move at all, creating some tension for the reader to kind of figure out, okay, in the end, was she forced to move there, or was this a decision that she in the end made together with him? So creating some tension within this husband-wife role from the beginning. Then there's a sort of tension created with the implication that Leslie may have had an affair with Sun Yat-sen at some point, and that Willie is trying to figure out whether that was the case or not. So you're in creating this implication that Leslie may have done this, and that Willie will uncover this truth, which then when you're reading the past timeline, you're of course reading to find out whether she indeed had a relationship with Sun Yat-sen or not, while at the same time being like, yeah, this should not come out, this should not be something that Willie finds out about, because he's an author, so he will then just expose her probably. And then there is this other thing happening in that past timeline with Leslie's best friends, and that also creates plots tension throughout that part of the storyline as you're trying to figure out what happened to this woman, how her story ends because of reasons. Now, I really enjoyed it. I think it is written in a way that really works well for me. In principle, it's very simple prose, but it also definitely paints a picture and has very well chosen phrases. And as I indicated, there are so many elements to this story that just intrigued me and got me going. And I think the author just masterfully combined all of these elements to create a story that just really had me engrossed from beginning to end. I was always wanting to pick this book up. I had to kind of keep myself from it, be like, no, this is just my commute book. I'm not supposed to be reading it outside of that. I did listen to it for cooking, for example, and then the final evening I did finish it, because otherwise I would have had to go the entire weekend without listening to like the final hour, and I was like, no, that ain't happening. And so what I will say is this story takes place in like, I think past World War One, and like I think like after World War One, and it is taking place amongst white perspectives in an Asiatic setting. So you can definitely expect there to be instances of racism. There are no sort of instances of like white people performing violence on the native population or anything like that, but there is definitely like racial slurs being used, and there are instances in which it's clear that the white characters have this sort of feeling of superiority and a contempt for the native population. This is not the case for every single character, because, for example, our protagonist Leslie has grown up all of her life in this environment, and I feel like she doesn't have instances of this at all, but maybe I'm forgetting an instance here, but there are definitely throughout the book some instances of language being used in order to refer to Asian people that are definitely racist. Then there's also homophobia in there. I did not know this, but W. Somerset Maugham is gay, and so a lot of it, and there's actually quite some queerness within there's actually quite some gayness within this story. However, that also means that if you take like, I don't know, a 1920s perspective and you're looking at homosexual relationships, there is definitely homophobia in there. And this is also present in our protagonist, for example. There are definitely instances in which our protagonist will not be likable to us because of her homophobic views, but they make sense within the time, like within the but they make sense within the time period in which this was taking place. And then there are also instances of sexism, because women did not have many choices at that point in time, and so this is also addressed. Our character of Leslie does want more of a role for women, and she will go into debate with Sun Yat-sen at some point, for example, about his wish to create a society in China that is equal to women and men. And so she will kind of enter into debate with him to kind of test out how equal he's willing to go and how equal he thinks this society that he wants to build is actually going to be. But so yeah, absolutely love this one. So far, like this is my favorite, but I've only read 2, of course, and regardless of what else I might read so far, because I'm only going to be reading 5 for this in the end, I want this one to make it into the shortlist, definitely. So I have also started the next book already. This one only has like 4 chapters. It's basically just 4 big parts, and this is called This Other Eden by Paul Harding. Like, I've lost the light at this point, I don't even know whether you can still see, but this is about a sort of like island settlement off of the coast of the US, where basically some people started a society there at some point, and it's a very sort of like egalitarian society, let's say, because all of their descendants are basically mixed race. They all range very widely in terms of their racial profile, but there's no sort of like pure-blooded racial background in any of them, and it's kind of looking at the intermingling of the mainland into this group and kind of their prejudiced views on education, the way to bring up children and race and all of those things. I haven't gotten all that far, and I will say that so far it's not necessarily working for me all that much, just because I cannot be bothered to remember all of these characters and their backstories. And so I'm thinking it's probably going to be a little bit more of a letdown. So probably all of the books that I assumed were going to be like my favorites will be the letdowns. So let's hope that the other ones are going to be the ones that take me by surprise and like absolutely work for me. Hello! In the interest of giving you a different camera angle, we're filming from here at this point in time. So I finished This Other Eden yesterday, and this one really didn't do it for me. I am going to blame that on the narrative technique. So like it was just too distant, I guess. Like if we make the comparison to like camera lenses, I guess like you have your close frame zoomed in version and you have your wide angle shot, and I just prefer in cameras the wide angle, but in books not. So this one just was too scoped out, creating too much distance to the characters, and while it would occasionally like zoom a little bit more into specific characters and kind of like give you like an insight into their internal thoughts, it was always told through distance. You know, it was never a sort of like, it was never like a third person narrator that kind of hides behind the character. It always felt more like the sort of like distant, omniscient third person narrator. And even though there's not really any indication of like it being an omniscient narrator, there are no facts being told that, you know, these characters wouldn't know themselves, it definitely had that sort of distance that is there with an omniscient third person narrator. So the narration didn't really work for me. The one part that I feel like worked best for me was like the second part, because I feel like I could be wrong here, but I think that we were only really looking at two characters in that particular part, and so that was the closest that I got to being interested. I actually thought like, oh, okay, this is where like the focus of the story is going to move from now on, and I can get down with that. But then like in the third and the fourth part, that kind of disappeared again. We were zooming out again, and like there are just too many characters to follow, and if we were to get like full chapters in these perspectives, in the way that I'm used to in like a lot of fantasy, for example, where you're just like having a third person narration, but it is basically just like going through the lens of this one character, then that would have been fine by me. But here you have like chapters that are super long, and in each chapter there might be like 1 or 2 pages in which he's zooming in on one particular character, but you're never really feeling like you're in that character's head. Plot-wise, do you have anything to say about it? I mean, no, not really. Like, I thought it was interesting towards the end. There is some sort of like technique being used that I guess I cannot really go into, where it basically like one of the characters is like more artistically talented, and basically in one of the techniques it's kind of describing his artwork, and then like going into the chapter, and I like those sort of like descriptions of the artwork and the implications that it had about the future of this character that we don't actually get to see on the page. But yeah, didn't really work for me. So I'm going to be moving on to book number 4 on my list, which I didn't bring with me to the floor here, and if I need to get up and go and grab it, then yeah, that takes too much core strength for me to show on camera. So I'm going to be starting Western Lane by Chetna Maru, I believe. This is a sports novel, which is very interesting to find on a Booker long list. So it's a novel about a girl who plays squash and who wants to pursue that as a career, I guess. I don't know where this story goes beyond that, but it's a very short one, so hopefully I can still finish it today, because hopefully I can get this video out on Tuesday, but that means that I have to finish this book today and finish another book tomorrow. Yeah, that's not really my track record when it comes to reading, but we'll give it a go and we'll see how far we can get. So I read the first chapter of Western Lane by Chetna Maru. So as indicated, it's a book about squash. So all I really know is that we are following these three sisters whose mother passes away at the beginning of the story. They are of Indian descent, I believe. Like there's a lot of talk about a Pakistani squash player, but based on one particular line, I believe that they themselves are actually of Indian descent. And so their mother has just passed away, and their father kind of is figuring out what to do with them, you know, having to all of a sudden raise these three girls all on his own. And so he decides to really focus on squash as a possibility for them. Squash is a possible career for them. So far really liking it. It's much more of the writing style that I tend to enjoy. It is a little bit meandering in terms of its timeline, so it confuses me sometimes because we will like be reminiscing about the time when their mother was still alive, and sometimes I'm a little bit confused whether this is like told chronologically with just some flashbacks or whether the events are not really fully told in order or not. But so far so good. I'm only like 36 pages in, of course, but it is also only like how much is it even? It's not that long. It's like 116 pages or so, so I'm actually already like a fourth of the way in. But so yeah, here's hoping that I can finish this one still today, and hopefully it'll be another success story. So we are the day of the announcement of the shortlist. I did not finish the entire shortlist as expected. No, a long list. I also did not finish the 5 books I said I was gonna finish. I did not read the entire 6 that I originally did, but I didn't even read the 5 that I physically own. But so I did start A Study for Obedience yesterday. I got about 50 pages into this. I'm not entirely sure whether I should just DNF or whether I should just like continue a little bit. This is the type of book where I could see making it onto the shortlist, and I would understand if it made it onto the shortlist. It's just really not my thing so far. So all we really know is that this is a woman who moved in with her brother at some point in her life, or like fairly recent, and that she's been somebody who's always kind of felt like the odd one out, somebody who never really belonged. But really that's more or less all we know, and the way in which this is told, like the writing style is very like specific. So so in that sense I feel like okay, like it's like a writing style that, you know, people would take note of. Other writers would read this and be like, oh, okay, this is like a peculiar writing style, and they would like take note of that. So that's why I think it might make its way onto a shortlist, for example. But it's very contemplative. It's very much reflecting on, you know, her experience, her thoughts, meandering a whole lot. Like it seems to be wanting to tell the story, but like her thoughts are constantly like being derailed and sidetracked. And so nothing really happened in the 50 pages that I read, and like for a lot of times I was like, but why are we like talking about this particular, like what is the narrative thread? But I feel like the meandering nature of it is its essence, is its like writing style essence, I guess. So in that sense it does not work for me. We will see, because there is some sort of like foreboding, or at least in the premise there is some foreboding of, you know, like the town or something maybe turning against her at some point, which could turn interesting. But so the shortlist is about to be announced, I think. I think I timed this correctly, that I'm talking to you guys before the shortlist is actually out yet. But so for the 5 books that I read, so I think I am rooting for just one of them. The only one that I'm rooting for is, of course, The House of Doors. You've been watching this entire vlog, you know that this is the book that I really enjoyed. It's still not like, will it make it onto my favorite books of the year? Probably not, but I did really enjoy my time with this one. It made me want to try out W. Somerset Maugham's works, and it definitely made me want to read The Garden of Evening Mists by Tan Tuan Ng, which is a book that I've had on my e-reader for a super long time by this same author. And hopefully if I like that one, I'll read their other work, because they only have 3 works out at this point in time. But so yes, The House of Doors was absolutely worth my time, and I'm so rooting for this one. But that is basically the only one that I want to see on there out of these books. And in terms of what I expect, I kind of expect In Ascension to make it on there, because I kind of feel like this book has resonated with a lot of people, and because this is on the speculative side of things, it would also be like a good choice, I guess, on there, and to include something speculative in the shortlist and thus kind of show the variety of the prize. Personally, this one really let me down because I was really engaged in the beginning and then I just totally fell off of it. So for me personally, this does not merit the spot, but I would not be surprised to see it on there. And then out of the 3 others that I read, I feel like A Study for Obedience I could understand because of that specific writing style that I feel like probably works very well for the booker, because it is like playing with language, or like having certain type of writing style can definitely work very well for writers. Western Lane, I'm personally quite confused at how it made it onto the long list to begin with, because I don't feel like this is anything special at all. So I would be really surprised if this makes it onto the long list, the short list. This Other Eden really wasn't for me. Would I be surprised to see it on the short list? Not necessarily, but it's also a book that I don't want to see on it. So I think I will be less upset about having like Study for Obedience on there, or In Ascension. Though, as I said, In Ascension for me really didn't work, but maybe for others it was perfect, because I know that there are a lot of people who actually did really like In Ascension, and I feel like we started off with a setting that really worked for me with In Ascension, and then we moved to a setting that like maybe it could have worked if I was expecting it from the beginning, but I was expecting the beginning setting, and then I was very like disappointed that we didn't stay with that type of setting. So those are my thoughts now. Alright, got a little bit distracted, so should have been live 10 minutes ago, so let's refresh this website. So I don't know whether I already maybe missed some, but at least at this point in time what they've announced is This Other Eden. Not really surprised, but not really the one that I enjoyed. And then Prophet Song by I don't know who, which I haven't read, but I knew a lot of people were really enjoying, so I'm not really surprised by that one. So I definitely missed the first one, because now they've announced 2 more. They announced Western Lane, which gave me a little bit of an eye roll, but like what they said about it makes sense. You know, there were definitely these moments that I feel like the language perfectly captured certain feelings that cannot really be put into words almost, but still, all in all, as a whole, these were like small moments in between a big story that to me didn't necessarily feel all that special. And then the final one that she announced is The Bee Sting by Paul Murray, which I also haven't read. So I need to go back and watch once they're done with their announcement to see if the House of Doors made it. Okay, so they do have a post with the Booker Prize shortlist on there 2 minutes ago. What? It's not on there. This is the one book that I really enjoyed out of the 5 that I read, and it's not on there. What is on there? Apparently it's 6 books, right? Can I count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so out of the 6, I have read 2, which is indeed Western Lane and This Other Eden. Those I've fully read, and I've decided that I don't really enjoy them. I am reading one, because Study for Obedience, as expected, or like as I kind of anticipated, did make it through, but I'm not sure that I'm going to enjoy it. And then there are 3 books that I have not read, which is Prophet Song, The Bee Sting, and If I Survive You. Of course, the longest book on the Booker long list had to make it, which is The Bee Sting. To be fair, it's not super long compared to other years, but yeah, where is the House of Doors? The House of Doors really deserved it, in my opinion. And I feel like I have to check, because somebody who I know also had a book that they wanted to see on there. Yeah, I know what book that is. That also didn't make it. So we're going for some disappointment into the shortlist. So I am going to continue with Study for Obedience because it made it onto the shortlist, and so I do want to give it its full length to convince me. It's not a super long book. It's like 190 pages. I've read about 50 of it at this point in time. But I don't know whether I'm going to read any of the 3 ones that I haven't read, because especially if Study for Obedience does not convince me, then like half of the shortlist will have already been a letdown. Which statistically speaking would then mean that the other half would be like the ones that I like, because on the shortlist there are always stuff that I like and stuff that I don't like, but I don't know, that just seems like setting myself up for failure, you know, because of the fact that all 3 others are already like a disappointment. It's gonna make it more difficult to convince myself to read the other 3, I guess. But so I will still read Study for Obedience, and I will still update you guys once I finish that, to let you know what's gonna happen next, I guess. Hey guys, so it is the 1st of October and I've finished the final book for this vlog yesterday evening, so I finished Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein. Now I can totally understand why this made it onto the shortlist. I think this one has a really like distinct writing style, a writing style that will not work for a lot of people. And this also is really, really good at establishing an atmosphere, and is a book that has more questions than answers, I feel like. Definitely, like, not a whole ton happens in this book, but definitely the entire book altogether paints a vivid picture of a situation, and sort of like us versus them, or like one person versus them type of situation, where you have this woman who's a newcomer to the neighborhood, who does not speak the language, who indicates that she's usually very good with languages, but for some reason, like the language of this place that we never really find out what place it is, just doesn't make it into her brain. She's just like incapable of learning this language apparently, and really to the extent that she cannot even say hello, for example, in the language. And so this automatically already creates a barrier between her and the townspeople, but then certain actions of her are interpreted differently by the people around them. A lot of things start happening in the neighborhood right after she appears, weird stuff that hasn't happened in like decades, or if one of them has happened in decades, definitely not all of them together have happened in decades. All of this creating this sort of like gloomy, sinister atmosphere, and by the end of it, certain actions definitely make you like question who's right in this. Like, there doesn't have to be a right person, but you definitely start to doubt the protagonist as well, because originally you're just kind of like feeling like, you know, she's just a woman who is trying to like get along with the people there despite the language barrier, and who's kind of trying to reach out in her own way. But the further you get into the book, the more that you start to see her actions as being questionable, and wondering whether maybe there's some truth to the fears of the people around her, or whether maybe the circumstances of the people's reactions to her have led her to act in ways that are just really weird, and, you know, potentially like it's never like, you're never sure of anything when it comes to this book. It's never a point of me being like let's give the example of, because this is not what happens in the book, but let's say she were to poison somebody, for example. Like, it's never said that she poisons somebody. It would be then that you see her administering things and you're wondering like, wait, is she actually poisoning this person? So it's that type of thing, you know, where there is no intent mentioned, there is no action like assigned to her that really clearly defines her as an evil character or something like that. But there are certain things happening in the book that you're kind of like, wait, is this good stuff? Is this just like innocent? Am I starting to read too much into it because of the people's reaction to her? Is this book making me question her now, whereas originally I was just like on her side? So I do think it's a very interesting book, and I can imagine, because basically the judges for the Booker Prize read every book multiple times, I can imagine that upon reread this is also a very interesting book to kind of go back to the beginning and look at whether your opinion about this character now changes if you've had the sort of like, if you've already read the book once, whether you pick up on whether like actions from the first half that seemed innocent at that point in time start to get a difference, whether you start to see them in a different light, for example. So actually this one, like I haven't rated it very high because I still really kind of struggled with the language at times, with like keeping like, because of the way it is told, it's kind of like hiding the action to some extent. You're kind of like looking for action and clues throughout a lot of meandering thoughts, and so that's writing style made it difficult for me to get through to some extent and to fully like grasp this story and be like, oh yeah, this is what this story is about. But it is, on the other hand, a super interesting one in the sense that it raises so many questions. This mainly made me think of My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. However, I feel like in My Cousin Rachel is probably more spelled out, but definitely the vibe of that book I've also got in Study for Obedience, actually. So yeah, it happened to be one of the like bigger successes for me on this shortlist in the end. But so, we're through with this vlog. I've given you all of my opinions throughout. I'm not going to repeat those. Will I still read something off of the shortlist? I do still have If I Survive You, I think it's called, which I have an audiobook version for, so potentially that is one that I'm going to be still listening to if I find the time for it. My money in the right now, I guess, would be on Prophet Song, just because I've seen quite a lot of praise for that one, but I don't think that I want to read that one personally. So yeah, we'll just see. Well, I think October is going to be a month in which I definitely don't focus on the Booker Prize, so we'll see if in November I am in the mood to dive back into the Booker or not. But yeah, I am happy with this experiment. Like, I am happy that it made me prioritize In Ascension. In the end, it was not an all like positive experience. However, I'm happy that I've read this book now. I know my opinion about it, and so it doesn't have to be one of those like, oh, when I have to get around to it because potentially I'm gonna really love this book type of things. I have read The House of Doors now, which I really loved, and I now know that I need to get around to that other Tan Twang Ung book that I have on my Kindle, and yeah. For some of these, they were okay experiences. For others, less so. But yeah, that's always the case with the Booker Prize. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this vlog and see you guys for the next one. Bye!